Here's a culture war rage baiter who loves to whine about gay Klingons and who thinks that Star Trek is right-wing and Christian.
Vic Mignogna did something extremely special when he made Star Trek Continues. It was an awesome thing, and it looked like real Star Trek. Actually, I was rewatching it this morning because I'm heading to a convention where Mignogna and Chris Doohan are actually appearing today. I'm going to meet them for the first time in person, and thank you for guys for getting me his contact. I'm talking to him today. He really just upped the bar on fan films to a point where obviously Paramount got scared back in the day for good reason, because this on a shoestring budget, just nothing to it, just trying to do it themselves, exemplified you can make real Star Trek, and you don't need a $20 million shiny lens flare, explodey super weapon thing to make something that is good.
Star Trek Continues recreates the sets, costumes, and lighting of the original series, which also didn't require $20 million to produce. The whole series cost less than $15 million.
In fact, if they just made something like this and just gave him a modest $100,000, $200,000 budget per episode, I think they'd make a ton of money off of it, to be frank.
The most commendable thing about Star Trek Continues is that it so accurately reproduces the look of the original series. I don't see how a bigger budget would increase its ability to accomplish that. It would just end up looking more modern, which defeats the whole purpose of the show.
It's ridiculous. And I always actually advocate, I think our copyright system's broken and stupid. It doesn't make sense that a random corporation owns something like this when the creators are long dead. It's just like, what?
The point of this is to give the original owner's heirs something to inherit. The earliest episodes of Star Trek enter public domain in 2062, so we'll be able to make as many Star Trek fanfics as we want eventually.
It's insane, but that's a different story. But I always advocate that they should open up licenses and just let people do things. I think it'd be better for creativity. I think it'd be better for fans, etc. I mean, imagine if I could just make my own Star Trek books and just do that, and Vic Mignogna could just make his own Star Trek whenever he wants. I mean,
you'll be disappointed to hear that since Paramount merged with Skydance, they've actually jacked up the price on licensing Star Trek to other companies and fan artists by sometimes as much as 2,000%.
They clip a fee, everybody's happy. But the thing is, they want control. They want to have the message under their sort of deal. And the message they promote is not the values of Star Trek. In fact, Star Trek, I always argue, is an inherently right-wing and Christian sort of setup.
I've heard others say that they think Star Trek is right-wing because Starfleet has a hierarchical rank structure based on the U.S. Navy. But Starfleet exists in a society that has abolished money. That doesn't sound right-wing. It's also always been a multinational, multicultural, multi-ethnic service under the authority of an agency of the United Earth government. That sounds an awful lot like globalist DEI to me. Speaking of DEI, one of the fundamental elements of Vulcan philosophy is infinite diversity and infinite combinations. While the original series has a spotty record on gender issues, it did try to be progressive with respect to gender politics, at least relative to what they were in the 60s. There were women serving as officers on the ship, which was not a thing back then. Women were prohibited from serving on combat vessels by 10 U.S.C. Section 6015, which wasn't ruled unconstitutional until 1978. Having women play such prominent roles on starships doesn't sound very right-wing to me. One episode of Star Trek also featured an interracial kiss between Kirk and Uhura that NBC was reluctant to air because they feared the reaction of the Bible Belt.
And Vic Mignogna actually nails the point on this, and then it goes back to thinking about the original series, which also nailed the same points on this. And I'm going to get into why that is in just a moment. So please hit the like and subscribe button and join us here as I talk about all things Star Trek. I appreciate you guys being here. I do write my own books, and even though I don't have a Star Trek license, and I came very, very close once. I was working with a writer from The Next Generation, who actually pitched an episode, and they liked the pitch that she gave. They put it in the door. She was going to do that. They didn't want to do that episode, so they actually assigned her something else. And so this pitch still existed, and so I went to Simon & Schuster with Pocketbooks and said, hey, I've got a lost episode of The Next Generation. Can we just do it? I had talks for a bit with the editor, and then they ghosted me because, of course, politics, right?
Right, politics. I'm sure that was it.
So, yeah, I've been watching Star Trek Continues. I rewatched the first episode this morning, which is called The Pilgrim of Eternity. It opens up with an echo of Spectre of the Gun, which is the kind of bad third season Western episode of Star Trek, but he's doing so in the holodeck in this. And then what happens is they encounter this like alien object out in space, and this artifact siphons the ship's powers. It forces them to destroy it, and it reveals two life forms, including a frail-aged Apollo, who was known as the Greek god from their prior encounter.
Their prior encounter was in an episode in which Dr. McCoy mentions that Scotty doesn't believe in gods.
And that's from Who Mourns for Adonai, one of the better episodes and more well-known episodes of the original series. And so I posted about Who Mourns for Adonai as I thought about it. If you guys don't remember this one where Apollo demands the worship and, they're like, no, thank you. And there's a big quote from that. And this is why I always say Star Trek was inherently right-wing and Christian. This is one of the quotes from Captain Kirk, very, very poignant. "Mankind has no need for gods. We find the one quite adequate."
There were a couple of oblique nods to Christianity in the original series, but they fall far short of establishing that Star Trek is inherently Christian or that it has Christian roots. It was occasionally incidentally Christian, but that's pretty different from being inherently Christian.
Captain Kirk. Of course, that was followed up later in Bread and Circuses when they talk about the Son of God as well, making it clear what the correct religion for the Federation is supposed to be at this point.
The correct religion of the Federation? The planet that worshipped the Son of God wasn't a member of the Federation. If Christianity were the correct religion of the Federation, why did you not see Vulcan Christians or Andorian Christians?
Now, this gets absolutely ignored in modern Star Trek, where they, are just, off the rails, and they're just all about social justice and not about science, and not about human betterment, and not about philosophy, not about, just making mankind into what it should be and the best of mankind.
What do you think social justice is? Do you really think this episode was not about social justice?
Which is what this was. This was Manifest Destiny in the stars in the 1960s, and it's been warped ever since then.
Manifest Destiny is the idea that the U.S. was religiously ordained to spread from the Atlantic to the Pacific. It was an ideology of conquest. That's not what the Federation does. That's what the Terran Empire from the Mirror Universe does. Maybe this guy thinks the Terrans are good guys.
So this is where Star Trek had its basis, and I think Vic Mignogna understood this. So when he made this, the Apollo falls back into his trap. I'm going to spoil a little bit of this episode. I mean, it is what it is. And he demands worship, and it turns out there's this gland that they have that they actually draw energy from human worship, this species. And so it's very easy to fall into that trap, and he just feels better, more powerful as that comes along. And so of course that causes conflict with the crew and the like, and that's where it all ends up. Now, as this goes along, eventually Uhura ends up nearly killed and actually stops life signs and all that. And Apollo actually has to self-sacrifice some of his energy to heal her. And when he does so, he finds that actually brings him a bunch of energy as well, and actually resets him and makes him feel whole again.
If that's a metaphor for Christianity, it's sending mixed signals about Apollo not being a real god, but also acting like Jesus.
Which is interesting. So they flipped the script on this whole Apollo situation, and it exemplifies, and based on that one deal, we don't need multiple gods, we need the one God. There's one better way, and the better way is self-sacrifice, because Christ said that there is no greater love shown than a man who lays down his life for his friends, right?
If that was the intended metaphor of the story, it's a bit of a stretch.
And so that's exactly what this went through. It was a very, very Christian theme through this episode.
If you say so.
And yet, it felt exactly like original Star Trek. Now, I've been watching through Star Trek with my wife, who's never seen it before, any of this stuff. And I just had this on this morning when she came downstairs. She didn't know that this wasn't official Star Trek. She said she thought it was this, as an outsider normie, didn't see any difference between this and the original series episodes that I play in the background every single day. And that is a testament, again, to exactly how well this was done and how somebody who understands the ethos of Star Trek can do this. And the ethos of Star Trek comes with a lot of Christian values, right? Now, Tachyon Pole's podcast gave a comment on the values of Star Trek a couple weeks ago or whatnot, and he actually said that, there's a lot of Christian values in Star Trek. He actually agreed with that premise, which I was kind of surprised by, because of course, Gene Roddenberry, we know, ended up as he came along in life, became atheistic, became just angry, embittered, etc. Later down the line, as he kept going on and on with age.
Why would he be embittered? He was certainly spiteful, but he was spiteful against the network executives who wouldn't let him do the woke story premises that he wanted to put into a show called The Lieutenant. The whole reason he created Star Trek is so he could allegorically smuggle in anti-racist messages that the network was afraid would piss off the Bible Belt.
When You couldn't get even blacks on television, and I not only had a black, but a black woman and a black officer. And that'll show them.
And I think there's a couple things that came with that. One, power and the fact that he received a little too much worship, which is kind of, the warnings of who mourns for Adonai and for this episode as well, were a big part of that, right? Those are the warnings that kind of worship and narcissism causes problems and is something to be avoided, right? And I think he fell trapped to that as he got this like rabid Star Trek fan base that followed him around and just kind of followed his every command. He'd kind of generate that hubris a lot of the times. Second, I think the 70s and the hedonism, I think people led into drugs and things like that. That happened a lot in the 70s and the like. And I think it just kind of warped him, right?
This guy seems to paint Gene Roddenberry as though he was Christian when he started Star Trek, or at least was sympathetic toward Christianity until money and power made him an atheist. If that's what he thinks is the case, I'll need a citation on that. I can't find any quotes from Gene Roddenberry espousing or endorsing Christianity or religion in general.
So Star Trek went along with these values from the 60s because it was a team production. It wasn't just him. He wasn't all completely off the rails at the time. And of course, a lot of the people involved were just devout Christians. In fact, one of the producers of the Star Trek at Paramount stopped Gene Roddenberry from making an anti-God movie out of the motion picture because he was a devout Catholic. So as much as Gene Roddenberry might have had this stick on his, up as whatever, or chip on his shoulder, or whatever you want to call it, later on in his life, these values came through.
Sounds to me like Star Trek is inherently atheist, but the folks writing the checks were trying to stifle that.
And it didn't just come through in original Star Trek either. Obviously, once Deep Space Nine came into play, faith and belief became very, very key to the Bajoran people, and that was meant to be something that was respected, right? Even as Ben Sisko goes through it, he doesn't believe it at first, and then he kind of accepts the role as it comes through and accepts that prophecy is real, and that's pretty interesting as that goes along.
Star Trek has always been humanist. Tolerance for religions you don't believe in is a humanist value. Also, the prophets that live inside the wormhole in Deep Space Nine are non-corporeal aliens, of which there are many in Star Trek. They're not supernatural entities.
There's also a Star Trek Voyager episode people don't realize where 7 of 9 gets this mystic vision of Omega particle as perfection, and this comes from science, the God particle. They talk about it, where they can't really explain it, but it seems to gel everything together, right? And so that's an extrapolation of that into sci-fi.
The God particle was what pop science books and articles called the Higgs boson, and it doesn't hold things together. It gives particles mass. I don't know where this guy gets the idea that scientists don't understand how this works.
At the end of it, she contemplates a crucifix in a chapel simulation in the holodeck, and Janeway interprets this as her first spiritual encounter, evoking Catholic theology and, of course, encounters with the divine in this. So pretty interesting on this level. And then, actually, despite the Kurtzman era, one of my favorite parts of Strange New Worlds was Captain Pike actually talking and praying the Our Father because his girlfriend was dying, and he just was throwing everything out there, and he turned to prayer and he turned to his belief because he grew up Catholic was what they kind of implied in the episode, and he came back and actually said that prayer. That was one of the Strange New Worlds oddly went based in a couple of spots in season 3.
Pike is portrayed as being Christian, but I don't read this as an endorsement of Christianity. It's not like the story showed the prayers as being what cured his girlfriend.
And so that's where, again, it feels, and those moments in Star Trek work. And it works because that's what the fundamental themes of Star Trek always are. So Vic Mignogna did it very overtly here. However, it wasn't preachy, right? If you look at the way he did it, he wasn't telling you to believe in any kind of religion. He was just telling you self-sacrifice and, of course, doing good unto others is a good thing. And that's kind of a universal moray that applies to everybody, and everybody kind of loves that. Now, we know Vic Mignogna is a very deep and rich Christian, and that's part of his, that's exactly why he did something like this.
Was Vic Mignogna always a Christian, or is he a Russell Brand kind of Christian who converted to ingratiate himself to the Jesus market after allegations surfaced?
But at the same time, this is the type of storytelling that Star Trek does that doesn't just tell half the country they're bad people or whatever like that.
Several episodes from the beginning pretty clearly told the folks who defended Jim Crow laws that they were bad people.
Except they're going to botch the Klingons again in Star Trek Starfleet Academy. This is the new advertisement, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. We have 2 weeks to flatten the curve, everybody, of Starfleet Academy. And we're going to have a lot of fun this whole step through here. Now, This character, Jaden, yes, painful. Even the name, it's like a botching of the Klingons, right? Jaden Smith, that's all that makes me think of. Was shown at New York Comic Con to be wearing a skirt originally. And I got some comments on that video when I made it going, it could be like a kilt. It's like, okay, Klingons have never had that in the history of Star Trek. Shut up.
This is the future of Star Trek, though. This show takes place 900 years after Kirk and Spock. Would it not be possible for Klingons to adopt such a thing after 900 years? Also, this Klingon is in Starfleet. Since the Next Generation, the Starfleet dress uniforms, even for the men, had skirts. And even Worf wore one in the Season 7 episode Liaisons. He even explicitly complains that the uniforms look like dresses, and Riker tells him to stop being sexist. If you think dresses ruin Klingons, don't blame the Starfleet Academy show, blame the Next Generation. To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.